to all of our phenomenal viewers, listeners, and supporters. I am your host, Podcast Bree, and I am so excited to be here. If you're a new audience member, we are so grateful to have you. Welcome to another episode of Connected, where we discuss all things mental health, recovery, employment, and stories. Before we dive in, this episode is sponsored by Contra Costa Behavioral Health Services and John Muir. On our next 2 episodes, Connected will be focused on the BIPOC community, sharing personal anecdotes, facts, and awareness from specialists around the Bay Area. Today's guest is a community leader. After discovering her cousin Carl, who'd been adopted by another family, she made it her mission to assist him in helping him explore deeper into his Samoan heritage. Thus blossomed Pasifika by Design, a podcast and YouTube show that highlights the extraordinary work of individuals and organizations within the Pacific Islander community, in which they both co-founded. The show was a huge hit on the radio until COVID forced them into cultivating something more of their own. Now operating out of their own studio, Carl and Nackie are still making significant waves in the community through life's challenges. Please welcome Nackie.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I know I say this every episode, but I'm so excited because I'm always excited to interview someone new. And this show has really branched into my outside of my comfort zone for the most part, and been able to speak to other people than what I'm normally usually speaking to about just like really deeper topics. So I'm excited that you're here, the first Samoan person that I've ever interviewed. So congratulations.
Thank you. I'm grateful. Thank you
Yes.
for having me.
This is going to be a fun episode. Nackie has an extraordinary story. When I was listening to it, I was like, oh my gosh, and just how her and Carl came together. And it's more so like you just never really know where life is going to take you. And I remember reading that she said, like, you know, things don't happen to us, they happen for us. Yeah. And that really resonated, and that really embodies and speaks to what you have been through to get to this point where you are today.
Yeah, it's crazy where we started. And I tend to ramble on, so chop me when you can. But like what you said, things don't happen to us, they happen for us. We got into a huge accident. The car was totaled, and I was okay. And Carl went into the ambulance, and we got to the hospital. I was standing around waiting for him, and they asked him who was in the car with him, and he said, "Oh, my cousin." And then they're like, "Are you okay?" And I had like a red mark going across my chest, and I said, "Oh, this hurts a little bit." And then they got off of me. They got off of him and jumped on me and said, "You could have internal bleeding. You could die." And so they ran tests, and after running extensive tests, they found that I had lymphoma, which is cancer of the blood. And the weekend before, that happened on a Sunday. On a Friday, I went to the hospital because I wasn't feeling good. And they said, "Oh, just take some antacids, go see your primary." And I was like, cool. But the accident happened in San Francisco, and we went to Zuckerberg Trauma Center. And so if it wasn't for that accident, I would not have gotten to the trauma center, which found the cancer that I previously went to another hospital that they couldn't locate. So the accident happened for me.
Yeah, that's
just an example of that.
Right. Yeah. And that's really what I was speaking to as well. It's just like, that was just extraordinary. And you could have just went home and never knew.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. We are going to take it back to the beginning so you guys can get a little bit of background. So Nackie is first generation, and her parents both migrated from Samoa here, met each other, and then had their children. And a lot of this question I do like to ask, because within the older community, mental health was not really discussed. They were going through their own. I had a guest the other day, and she was just like, back in the day, you didn't have time to be depressed. It's like, you better cry quick, wipe your tears, and then it's time to move on because you have to deal with life. So like, is it still taboo in your family to talk about mental health, being that the work that you've been doing is groundbreaking? Have you been able to like make strides within your own family to be more open?
I think just recently, within the last 5 years, we've been able to talk about mental health. Only just because when I grew up, same thing, like you were saying, we didn't talk about anything that was going on during our day. We did, if we had a problem, hurry up and figure it out because we got other stuff to do. It just was sat on. So I think because of my kids and the trauma that I went through growing up, I didn't want them to have the same issues or mental health issues that I had. So just within the last 4 to 5 years, I've been like, okay, let's talk about. I was like that, sit down, shut up. But I was following how my parents parented me.
Right.
So I tried to change that. So talking to them about the way I parent. So I have 5 kids. The way I parented my older two is completely different to the way I parent my youngest. And say my older two always say, "You didn't let us do that," and so I figured out that when I first became a parent, I was learning, like literally practicing on my older two what to do. I was really strict with them where I find out later it was unnecessary, And so that kind of affected their mental health, like my oldest daughter couldn't wear makeup until she was a certain age.
Yeah.
And where my younger 3 are like, whatever.
Right.
It wasn't that important to me when it comes down to it. So I think having that open discussion with my kids, because I didn't realize that bothered them until I said, what is going on? Like, why? And we've had other stuff happen in our house, that sexual abuse, physical abuse. So my husband and I had to have an open discussion with our kids to have this, how are you feeling? This has nothing to do with you, or this, what happened to this person wasn't your fault, or it's not their fault. It's just trauma that was passed down. This person that, I was molested when I was 9 years old. So I had to go through all of my trauma and talk it out and work it out before the way I parented my girls was because of all the trauma that I was going through. Right. Can't go out, can't do this. You have to stay home. Because I didn't want anything bad to happen to them. That it all boiled down to what happened to me. So I've slowly started to trust my girls. Where are you going? Okay, go ahead, check in. Now the phone, I have your location.
Right.
So but just slowly open, trusting them and having a discussion of how do you feel about this? How did it make you feel to hear this? Know that it's not, I used to blame myself. It's not my fault. This is something that happened to me because it's, so mental health is a discussion in our home now, just because we realize the damage that it does to not talk about it. And me growing up with my parents, it wasn't discussed. Problems weren't discussed, and I didn't want to pass that on to my kids, and I don't want them to pass it on to my grandkids.
Yeah.
And my parents used to. The only way they knew to punish us was to beat, the belt.
Right. Got the belt many unnecessary times.
And so I hated that. It hurt, like, not only my feelings, I think it hurt my feelings more, but I didn't want my kids to go through that. I didn't want them to be scared of me. Like, my dad would raise his hand and I didn't want that. And I don't want it for my grandkids because that wouldn't be good.
Yeah.
For my kids. Is it generational?
That's exactly breaking generational curses.
Yes, that's what I don't want to pass on because there's so many. But so I try to catch myself, and
you're not perfect.
Yeah,
you're still a work in progress.
Far from perfect, and I'm not a perfect parent. I'm not a perfect wife. I'm not a perfect person. So, if I can catch myself and talk about it, then and having an open discussion with my family, is what we do now.
Have you been able to have a conversation with your parents, or have you done the work to forgive them?
I have with my dad before he passed. He used to beat us, and not that it was normal back then, but all my friends got beat too.
Right.
And we joke about it, but it's not funny. Really, it's not funny. And so one time I was talking to him. And my dad has a scar about this big on his ankle. And I said, "Oh, where did you get that from?" And he said, "Oh, I got in trouble from school when I was growing up. And my grandfather found out and was chasing him with a machete back in the islands." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, he was chasing me around. And I climbed up a tree. And I got as far as I could when he swung the machete, and it caught my ankle." And then I started crying and I was like, oh, you got abused. And knowing how that felt, you abuse us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think at that time he didn't realize what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could see a light bulb went off.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was like, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But this was after I was grown,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so I think then he realized it, but he didn't until I mentioned it.
Yeah.
So we've had the discussion and he's apologized, and the verbal abuse, and just because my grandfather did it to him. So that's all he knew. And so that's what he was taught. We learn from what we see or our parents. So sorry.
It's totally okay.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be the first one to cry, and I think I'm still good. And thank you for being so vulnerable to be able to share that. And I'm glad that you were able to have some kind of reconciliation
with him
and have an honest conversation before he passed away. And we really have to be better at forgiving our parents, because I want to say my parents did the best that they could with their circumstances. And so my dad was just doing what his father did to him and what his mother did to him. And so it's like all these different generational things. And it's been the common theme for these past couple episodes I've been doing where that's just what it was. And but then there's certain things that stick with you.
Yes.
And I didn't really know how much animosity I had for my stepfather until my mom passed away.
Right.
And then he got more softer and stuff because he seen like how strong I was, and he just felt bad.
Yeah.
And then we had to have like a whole sit down conversation. I was just like, you whooped me for the
dumbest
things. Like I was just doing regular kid stuff, or things were like genuinely an accident, or I was acting out because I didn't have my mom there at a certain time. My mom was deployed for a while, so I was just with him. And so it was just like all these different layers, and I just kind of have to I still have some animosity. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not perfect, but it's slowly the barrier is starting to break, but it's still, trauma still lives with you in your body, so you still kind of have like a natural reaction to certain things. So we're a work in progress, you guys, and I hope our viewers and listeners are watching and listening and can be able to kind of think and maybe have some kind of conversations with their family as well. So thank you for sharing that. So moving on, so we're not sitting here crying all day because it's gonna we're in there. So with you, can you share your incredible story that led you to Carl? So just like fast forward, you were working for a trucking company.
Yeah.
And then you were just like, this can't be my life. I can't just be going to work, coming home, being a mom, being a wife. And then you met Carl, and then it kind of spewed into your passion. So can you give me like a brief story of how you got to Carl?
He did 23. So he was adopted when he was a baby. And then he found us through 23andMe. He did 23andMe and found a cousin that was in Las Vegas who took the test as well. And he contacted her. And my mom is one of 7 girls. So we're very close. We know all our first cousins, at least we thought we did.
Right.
And so she took the test, and she called me and said, hey, this guy claims to be our first cousin. He's got birth dates on his birth certificate, but the name of the parent is blocked out. And so some of the birthdays were my mom's sisters. And I said, oh, that's my mom, and 2 of her sisters are born in November. And so it said 3 of this anyway. So I said, those are my mom and, Auntie so-and-so's birthdays. And so she said, okay, let me figure out who he is. And he had a DNA test.
Right.
But we still didn't believe him.
Right.
Because we have to go through the coconut wire.
Right. I know all my cousins.
I know all my cousins. So we called, I called my mom. And I told her this guy said, he is our cousin. He was given up, he was adopted and da-da-da. And my mom said, oh, yeah, one of her sisters had a baby and gave him up for adoption. And so he still lives in Sacramento, and I live in Vallejo at the time. So I said, let's meet. We met for lunch, breakfast, October 24th, 2015. And I remember that day because it's my son's birthday. And so we met in Vacaville. We had breakfast. And when I met him, I was overwhelmed because, first of all, we're family and I didn't know him. But second of all, he looked ill and frail and sick. You know, he looked just like my aunt who had given him up. And so in my mind, he and I just stayed in contact. We talked every day. We text. We kept in contact. And I was trying to learn everything about him. He was trying to learn everything about our family. And so we talked all the time. And my husband, who is so grateful that I left him alone, you know what I mean? He got his peace and quiet. And then Nicole, Carl's wife, was so happy to get her peace and quiet. So we hung out on Saturdays. We would go to lunch and breakfast and just literally catch up. And because I thought at the time that he was going to die, because he has stage 4 prostate cancer.
Oh, okay.
And he said that the doctors had given him 5 years to live. So in my head, I was like, okay, I'm going to give him everything he needs, everything he wants. And so we just talked every 5 minutes, every whatever. So we went to a community event. He wanted to get to know his Samoan culture.
Yeah.
So we went to
and I'm sorry to cut you off. He was raised by a white family.
He was raised by a white family in Fort Bragg,
okay,
which is
up
north.
Yeah.
And so, and he has, I wish he was here because he has a whole story about growing up as the only brown person in a white, city, country, whatever. He listens to podcasts. I had never listened to podcasts before I met him. And he said, we talk so much, let's do a podcast. And I was like, okay, nobody's going to listen, but okay. So he found FCC Free Radio, which is in San Francisco. And we went there and started doing our podcasts on Sundays at 10 o'clock for 2 hours. And I was like, I can't talk for 2 hours. I mean, I can, but but not on the air. When we get on the air, I'm going to freeze up. And so we got on and talked for 2 hours about events that were happening, Pacific Islander events that were happening in the community that nobody knew about. So we talked about that. We had Pacific Islander guests come on, and we just wanted to highlight Pacific Islanders and the work that they're doing. And so people started coming on, and then before you knew it, we were number 1 on the radio station. And I was like, we had 6 people watching, right. So everybody else has 5 or 4. But so from that, we started doing PBD. We labeled it. We called it Pasifika by Design. It was Poly by Design when we first started, but to be inclusive of the Pacific Islanders, we changed it to Pasifika, Pacific Islanders.
Can you explain? I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
Can you explain what that means?
So, Poly by Design was really our DNA. It started with our DNA that we are Polynesian, so we were like Polynesian by design. But then I think people were taking it as it's just a Polynesian nonprofit. And so we wanted to be inclusive, including the whole Pacific Islander. And when we say Pacific Islander, that is including Polynesian, Micronesian, and Melanesian. And so that is the Pacific Islands. And so we changed it so that we're not just including Polynesians, that we're including the whole Pacific Islands.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Incredible story. Okay. Just wanted my viewers to know, listeners to know.
Yeah.
So they can be of support. So then after you did the radio show and then the studio shut down because of COVID.
Yeah. So we went to the radio station and then we decided that we can do this on our own. So we broke off and started doing our own show at a nonprofit organization, gotcha. Asian American Recovery Services, let us use an office space for 2 hours every Sunday for free. And then COVID happened. And then they sent us an email saying, we're going to shut down. So because of COVID, we're going to shut down. So we ran to the studio, got all our equipment, and then went to my house and set up in my living room. And so during COVID, we ran the show from my dining room. And it was crazy. And then that's when because before Carl was doing everything. He was setting
Billy.
up. Yeah, he was Billy. He was
Shout out
setting
to
up the
Billy, you
camera.
guys.
Yes, big shout out to Billy. He was setting up the camera. He was like YouTube University. We said he created a studio from watching YouTube, and so we got to my dining room, and it was COVID, and Mena, my daughter. We said, "Can you help us set up?" And so then she took over producing the show,
Yeah.
and just made it really what it is today with all her flashes and
Mena's great. I
yeah,
love Mena.
she's great. So from that show, we started. There's a Dr. Reno Samoa, who's on the White House Initiative for Asian American Pacific, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. He was in the work of COVID-19, and he was updating us on where Pacific Islanders stood in the data during COVID, and we were dying at a high rate because we Pacific Islanders, we gather, we live in multi-generational homes. We can't not go to a party if our life depended, but our life depended on it at that time. So we were getting data from him every week, every Sunday, and then HHS. They got a hold of the show and then asked us if we can do a show just on COVID-19 geared towards Pacific Islanders. And so that's how our other podcast, Koviki Talk, started. So and then from there, we got out of my dining room after COVID was done and got our own studio from grants that help us pay for all our equipment and our studio time. So yeah, I'm grateful.
That's awesome. And it's interesting that like you just really never know where life is going to take you when you start something. You might think you have like this outcome, but you didn't think you're going to be reporting for COVID-19. And I'm pretty sure that was like a wake up call too for the community, because you guys do gather a lot. You guys are very family oriented.
Yes.
So that was probably very hard for your mental health as well. And I'm talking about the community or the Samoan community as well, to not be able to gather and get out and see each other in a certain kind of way. And I thought about that like with my grandparents too. My grandma's very, very social, but then come COVID, when you can't be around certain family members, it kind of like makes you digress a little bit faster than what you were originally digressing.
Yeah, and
we're humans.
People weren't able to leave their homes, and some people that lived alone, it started messing with their mental health. You know, they were getting depressed, and so we started meeting with people. We created Pasifika Talanoa during COVID, which was, if you're alone or you want to socialize or just come in and chat, we created, here's the Zoom link, and we had like at times 10 to 20 people join from like different parts of the state, and just talking about, oh, I've been home, you know, and it's good to socialize, just to talk to other PIs. How are you doing? And so I was happy about that.
Yeah. Right on. So can you explain a myth or a specific stereotype that you don't agree with about Samoans?
I think it's the whole reason why we started Pasifika by Design, is that we're stereotyped as actors or as athletes, which is amazing. It's amazing that, but that's all people used to see us as. And so we started really to highlight Pacific Islanders as educators, community leaders, entrepreneurs, highlighting and interviewing them so that we can see other people that look like us in different lights, which 100%. Athletes and actors are amazing because they really shine the light on Pacific Islanders. You know, it gets people curious. What is a Samoan? What is a Tongan? What is, you know, what is a Chamorro person? And so us highlighting as educators and community leaders, giving, I think, the younger kids other options outside of those, to see people that look like them doing other things, and just to show them that role models come in brown. Come in brown.
And you guys talked about it on another episode. It was Pacific Islander moms, educator moms. You guys did about 2 years ago with Kitty, and I don't remember the other young lady's name, but she was a teacher in Portland and her mom was a counselor. And so I was watching that episode, and you said that you never seen a PI professor until your daughter went to college, and she was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, we have like a bunch of them here
Yeah.
in San Francisco. So like, what did that do to your, or how did that speak to your inner child when you were able to see that?
I think I was so in awe, or just like proud to see a Pacific Islander professor. Because growing up, I didn't see anyone that looked like me doing anything outside of athletes or labor. Like my mom was a maid and then worked her way up to a manager at a hotel.
Gotcha.
And so that's all I knew. My dad was, he did labor. He did labor. So to see an educator that looked like me really was amazing. And for my daughter, for her to see that as normal, that's badass.
Yeah.
For my kids to grow up to see that as normal is amazing to me, because I think representation it really told me that representation really matters for our kids.
And it's hard to be able to see yourself doing something if you don't see anybody else in your
Doing it,
community
yes,
doing it.
yes,
So, and
yes.
kids have to see that it's obtainable.
Right.
So one of my last questions is, what has been the greatest outcome doing this kind of work?
I think one of the greatest, or there's so many, but one of the heartwarming things for me at least is to see the young people empowered by the individuals that we've been highlighting on our show, and getting inspired by the community leaders that are doing tons of great work, and people that come on our show that share the brave people that come on our show to share their story, and just to there's unsung heroes in our community that deserve recognition. And so if we can do our part in highlighting those people, a lot of the community work and a lot of people that are doing service get little to no pay. It's hard work. You guys are in community work too. There's literally no money. You just do it because you love it. There's a Samoan proverb, Oleala, Olepule, Tautua, leadership. The path to leadership is through service.
Absolutely.
And that's all. I'm so grateful. I'm such a crybaby. I'm so grateful for that because I've had the honor to see these people follow, and for me to understand that proverb by watching our people.
Yeah.
It just it's affirmation that our people literally are learning, creating leadership,
Making progress
through service, and really highlighting and showing. That's really the point that I want, is highlighting these unsung heroes that are doing the work.
Yeah.
And our goal is just to highlight them. And it's been my honor and my pleasure to get to meet these people, to be in their light. And then I take away something from everyone, whether it's 5 minutes or it's 5 years. I've taken so much from these people, our people. They've taught me how to be a better person, how to give freely, how to look at community work in awe of,
It's the true work.
It's the true work.
The true work.
Yes,
it really is.
Of course, doctors and lawyers and all those, but the true work is the community work and the people that are doing it. Dr. Patsy Tito, who is the executive director for Samoan Community Development Center, they've been there for 30 years in the heart of San Francisco, Sunnydale, visitation.
Okay.
And she's been, she's teaching kids. They have a youth program. They have adult senior program. And they've started implementing mental health. Clinicians. We now have Pacific Islander clinicians, where back in the day it was unheard of.
Right.
There's now Monumental, who is ex-NFL player who stopped playing because of a knee injury, but he said the psychology of it all. He's got his master's, his PhD in psychology, and is now working with NFL players to, anything emotional that they're going. So to be here and to watch our growth, the renaissance of our community is so humbling.
Yeah.
It's such a blessing. Yeah. And I'm so grateful that my kids get to learn and use these resources that are now available that weren't available when I was growing up.
And now your kids themselves, and I'm speaking of Minna, and she just got done doing a class that she taught through Job Corps, and then was able to inspire other kids who didn't feel like that they were even interested in picking up a camera or what have you. And then it's just a cycle continues, and hopefully it's just growth. It's up from here.
Yeah, it really is. And one of the things that I'm proud of course, is Minna teaching the photography and videography class. Sorry.
Okay, we should have tissues.
I know.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. But another one of my daughters who is a writer, and she's going to school to be a writer, but recently started teaching in during a summer program for Pacific Islander kids. And she didn't realize that she loves teaching. And then everywhere we go, they're like, Miss Abby, Miss Abby. It just warms my heart. She's like, I love it, Mom. I love working with the kids. So opening doors, opening new doors, or doors that you never thought you would walk through. You just got to take that step.
Kick the door down and walk.
Yeah.
Well, Nackie, I really, really, really appreciate this episode and the work that you are doing in your story that you've been sharing. Is there any lasting thing you want to leave us with? Any resources you want to give to our viewers, our listeners who want to support the PI community or you directly?
There's so many resources for Pacific Islanders. I think that everyone has one Pacific Islander friend, at least in California. But just, reach out to, there's Samoan Community Development Center that I mentioned earlier. There's tons of nonprofit organizations that I never knew existed for Pacific Islanders. Samoan Solutions, Asian American Recovery Services. I think there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that help Pacific Islanders. There's a little piece of the organization that help Pacific Islanders, but just Google. Watch our show. But I just thank you for having me. I appreciate the time and reaching out. And thank you, Billy.
Thank you, Billy. Well, everyone, this has been another great episode of Connected. Thank you for watching, listening from wherever you are. Don't forget to subscribe so you can be updated on our other episodes. And we are out of here. See ya.